Hello everyone, it is 1:01, so we're going to get started. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, which is sponsored by USDA NIFA through the North Central IPM Center. My name is Will Fullwider. I'm the project manager here at the Organic and IPM Working Group and will be hosting the webinar this afternoon. I'm also pleased to welcome our guest speaker, Regi Haslett-Marroquin, who will be speaking about decolonizing agriculture through indigenous regenerative thinking. Regi is a native Guatemalan with a deep background working on economic development projects with indigenous communities. He previously served as a consultant for the UNDP's Bureau for Latin America, as an advisor to the World Council of Indigenous Peoples, was a founding member of the Fair Trade Federation, and previously served as director of the Fair Trade Program at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy from 1995 to 1998. He currently lives and farms in Minnesota, is the co-owner and co-founder of Regeneration Farms LLC and Tree Range Chicken, and is the author of In the Shadow of Green Man, which recounts his journey from poverty and hunger to food security and hope. In the last year, he founded and launched the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance with the mission to build the infrastructure to scale up a regenerative agricultural model based around poultry production. Before I welcome Regi to begin his presentation, we'll just get some logistics out of the way and a couple of announcements as well. Questions for the presenter can be posed in the questions boxes in your GoToWebinar panel. And use these questions boxes as you see fit during the presentation, but we will not address the questions until afterwards, in which I will moderate the questions, pose them to Regi for anyone that may not be joining us through the webinar platform, but through the phone. If you're watching this webinar live, you'll receive an email in the next few days with the webinar recording, an evaluation, and a link to submit your CCA credentials to earn the 1 CCA CEU in nutrient management that is offered through this webinar. Furthermore, the recording of this webinar will be available through the Organic IPM Working Group website, which is found at that address. On to some announcements. We have 3 upcoming webinars scheduled. One in October with Gabe Brown, who will be talking about his regenerative agricultural model on his 5,000-acre farm near Bismarck, North Dakota. In November, we will be having a conversation with Lane Selman of the Culinary Breeding Network as she looks to work with different stakeholders in the food system to breed plants for their specific uses. And in December, we will have a webinar with Dr. Gladys Anati of the Rodale Institute, where she'll be presenting about her research on biological control of striped cucumber beetles. With those announcements and logistics out of the way, I will turn the presentation over to Regi, and he can get started.
All good?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and welcome everybody. We'll skip any more background, but I'll start by making a statement that is probably one of the most important realizations that got me into this work. I'm motivated by a deep sense of feeding the world and dealing with injustices and bringing people food security. But what I understood from the start, and this is where the decolonizing of the mind and the decolonizing of processes and methodology and all of that came to light for me, is in the fact that we have confused the need for knowledge as a source of solutions to a lot of the world problems. And in the process, we have discounted wisdom, traditions, the inheritances from our ancestors, where the actual answers to what we need today can be grounded. So I always say we need some knowledge, absolutely. I went to school for that. But more than that, we need wisdom. With a little bit of knowledge and a lot of wisdom, we can return and regenerate the world. With all the knowledge we have, but without the wisdom associated with it, is the way we have wrecked the planet and not about to kill ourselves in the process. So with that in mind, let's see if we can, unravel some of the thinking that I have been doing in partnership with hundreds and hundreds of Native communities, Native leaders, all the way from British Columbia down through Central America, Mexico, Central America to Colombia. And out of all of that work and those experiences, I brought into my work a new model, a new process, and seriously trying to not only decolonize my own mind, but the processes and the engineering systems that I am now part of with regenerative agriculture. The first thing we have to do when we want to solve something is to understand it. And understanding colonization and the process is critical. So I'm not an expert on this topic, but you would probably agree with me. Here are the basics. The first thing that happened, whether it was Christopher Columbus, whether it was Hernan Cortez or Pedro de Alvarado or whomever, say, quote unquote, discovered something, new world, whatever. These days is knowledge, and so on. And they named the discovery, in the U.S. was the New World or the Indies, as they called it, and so on. But the key was that there was a naming process that is central to that process of colonization. Right after that, becomes the actual formal colonizing process, which includes the creation of laws, which allows them the legalization of the appropriations that the colonizers are in the business of. And in the case of the U.S., for example, I don't know if you're familiar with the laws, but those laws actually established that natives had dominion over the land, but had no ownership. And the ownership was elected and adjudicated to the colonizing power. And that was established, by the way, mostly by the Catholic Church way back. So that way, the colonizer took legal ownership of the new space. And as a result, moved on to the next stage, which was the standardization and the scaling of repression as a way to extract that ownership and control and establish its own ownership and control systems. Because there was ownership, there was just no control, but the ownership of most of the native communities that got colonized and other communities, and I'm not just talking about U.S. natives, but Europe was native. The Chinese actually colonized a lot of territory, and we're talking about 10,000 years ago. We're not talking about Christopher Columbus coming to America as a way to understand colonization. But this is very, very crude and very easy to see across the history of colonizing. And then the last part of it, and this is where we are right now in many places, is the building of the systems that repress the indigenous thinking, but especially the attempts at reclaiming appropriated resources in a way of thinking, in the intellect. This is where we are right now. I mean, the burning of the Amazon, the expropriation of lands for palm oil, all of that has to do with this repressive system to ensure that we look at the world with the same eyes rather than from a decolonized mind perspective, which is a whole different way of thinking. So with that in mind, understanding how the system works is critical, but it's not the objective. The objective is to understand the reversal of that process. So the way I saw it was, the first thing was, and this is what I traveled across the world, and I have immersed myself into the original learning that I did in Guatemala before I started going to school and all that. But the first thing we did was reclaim and rediscover our Aboriginal systems. And I was lucky enough to have elders that helped me with this process in Guatemala, and then many, many other leaders and mentors that helped help to shape the mind and the process by which we reclaim and rediscover some of these ways of thinking. We also have to name and secure Aboriginal systems. They are in danger. They are like a species in danger of extermination. We have been losing, every generation loses a tremendous amount of these systems and knowledge and wisdom, and we need to bring it back, name it, claim it, and then secure it. And I'll show you later how we have done that with some of the work we're doing. We need to also rebuild that community governing and protection of those systems, which we used to have, and those were some of the first targets of the colonizing process, was to destroy that governing structure and that protection systems that that existed, on which some of these communities had survived for thousands of years. The standardization of processes to reclaim and return Aboriginal systems to their original purpose. Keep in mind that the original purpose of those systems did include feeding people and quality of life and creation of wealth, but very different than the way capitalist societies and colonizing powers understand that very same purpose and execute the methodology in the name of feeding the world, and that sort of eternal need and the meeting of that eternal need that we have. Building systems to protect existing resources and expand Aboriginal systems, organize the processes for reclaiming appropriated resources. That is also the space we are in now. And it is, I mean, we have to do all of these things at once, but it is this last part that is causing tremendous violence and reprisals from the colonizing systems that don't want to allow for the original way of thinking about resources, especially natural resources, to come back, because that would mean, if we go fully into regenerative mode, regenerative agriculture, decolonized approach to it, we would have to eliminate a lot of what is known as agriculture today and replace it with food production. Two very different things. So this is my example. And this process can be used for almost any sector, any industry. We, in my case, in my team, we chose poultry because poultry happens to allow us to engage almost every farmer in the world willing to engage in livestock production. No other livestock production allows us to not only tackle a very large sector of the industrial agriculture system, but also no other option in animal production allows us to engage the consumers and farmers at the scale that poultry can do, and especially with no boundaries, as in country boundaries, frontiers, or anything. It's also a very large industry. And so if we can win at decolonizing one sector, then we can create a blueprint for doing that to other sectors. Now, it's critical to point out that we start with livestock, because livestock is central to regenerative, the regeneration of the soil, the land, and the native species and the endemic systems of any area in the world. Now, it doesn't have to be poultry, but animals. Without animals, ecologists just stop to function, and or function in very different ways, and not necessarily for the benefits we seek. So this is my example on how we started by, first of all, understanding what was the origin, the indigenous approach to the decolonized approach to bringing livestock back into our current modern system has to start with understanding what was the original habitat and the original blueprint, geoevolutionary blueprint of that specific species. In the case of chickens, is a jungle fall, and because it's a jungle fall, there is so many hundreds of decisions that we can make just by understanding that fundamental geoevolutionary portion of its blueprint. It's the closest modern relative of T-Rex. That gives us another hint of how we need to approach it. So this is critical But also there's a lot of modifications to the original habitat of chickens, which works perfectly. A lot of it was done by native communities across the world. And so rediscovering that was central to our approach to the redesigning of poultry under a regenerative, indigenous, decolonized process and methodology. Basically, recovering original systems means something very simple. Native or indigenous thinking doesn't seek production. What we seek is energy management. Managing those energy flows is how the yield or the energy yield of this energy flows becomes the foods and the things that we need. When we focus on production, we normally undercut the fundamental flows of energy. Instead, we focus on more linear input-output based mental processes. That's a colonized mind at work. A non-colonized mind sees circles, not lines, and sees multi-dimensional space, not a flat piece of land. So this is how it works for chickens. You take the energy that comes into, say, your poultry unit, whether it's your farm or maybe a coop with its paddocks and things like that. So energy enters in there in the form of poultry feed. That the poultry is now raised in its natural environment. I'll show you briefly what that looks like in Minnesota, and I could show you if you follow us on Facebook, on our website, you'll be seeing the blueprints from many ecologies where we have adopted this same process blueprint. It's not a unit that is specified so closely that you replicate it like a cookie cutter, but what you do is you follow the process, and the process allows you to populate the energy, the system in a way that optimizes energy flows. So here comes this energy, enters the chicken in the form of feed. The chicken grows, but at the same time that it grows, the perennial canopy, which is central to the chicken's natural habitat, and that perennial canopy, we build it with multitude of species to create multiple strata, all the way from 3-4 feet above the chicken, all the way to sometimes 80, 60, 80 feet, like in the rainforest, or 36, 48 feet here in the big woods in the central United States in Minnesota. And anyway, the key is we are now capturing energy out of thin air, literally. If you are following the science behind carbon sequestration, all that, you will know that almost 100% of all of the growth in a plant doesn't come from the soil. It actually comes from the air. Now, the soil and the soil health is central, but it's central as a factory of energy, not because the energy comes from it. In fact, the soil is never depleted. It actually gets enhanced the more plants you grow in it. Just to give you an idea on how this energy management is critical to understand, because that at the end of this, when you go past the chicken, you got the paddocks, you got these perennial crops. The paddocks are where the chickens roam, so we can have them protected, especially from predators, and also keep them within a space that we can properly manage for biosecurity, for labor, for all kinds of, for sprouting grains and all of that that goes into regenerative poultry production. At the first harvest, and then again, keep in mind, we're not harvesting product, we're harvesting energy. Now, that energy is harvested in the form of meat, eggs, hazelnuts, elderberries, and so on. But if you're thinking energy rather than producing things, then you're going to see many, many more options from your field, instead of just taking corn, soybeans, or things like that, or even just chickens or eggs. There is a lot of energy that is not harvestable, but is extremely useful, that can be used for sprouting grain, like the organic matter in the soil, like the straw in the wood chips, all of those byproducts, plus the excessive energy, that comes directly from manipulation, mechanical manipulation of this, which comes in the form of manure, giblets, and feathers. And keep in mind, that's still energy that was fed to those chickens in the form of feed, that is now expressing itself in different forms. Some of it is harvestable, some of it is not. In fact, we calculated that we are not harvesting, maybe we're harvesting 20 to 30% of the total energy we are capturing out of the air. The rest of it is just rotating, circling. So there is also what we call the non-paddock production, where a whole new process starts with the raw material or energy input comes out of this these byproducts from the poultry, and allows us to regenerate quite a lot of soil. We calculate almost like around 20 to 1. So for every production unit of poultry, we can regenerate about 20 times the same space in extended landscape where there is no chickens, but it's still the energy from the poultry production gets spread out to produce allied cropping systems, vegetables, grains, perennial crops. Some of that energy then comes back into the system and starts the cycle again. The net result is that we are putting back around 60 to 70% of the total energy that we capture out of the air back into the cycle every time we turn this cycle around, which means it will be like you're getting $1, you spend 20, 30 cents, you put 70 cents or 60 back in the bag, and then every time you turn that dollar, you do the same. You end up extremely wealthy. And so the idea is to grow that wealth right there in the system. And as a result, now 10 years after I built the first demonstration unit for this system, we still haven't seen the end. We're still producing more sprouting systems. The hazelnuts that we use as the lower canopy, the understory, and the elderberries are still not maxed out. They're still showing incredible signs of improvements every year. I'm not going to go into the science of it or the data because we don't have time for that. I just wanted to show you how we decolonize the process by which we engineer not production, but energy management so that we can harvest the most energy out of our systems. This is what it looks like when we have reclaimed these aboriginal systems. One, poultry is restored to its habitat, its natural habitat, with canopy, with covered, with those plants you see there, those are the hazelnuts, incredibly productive. I won't make any claims right now because we're still taking a lot of data, but I figured we are, the hazelnuts that are not planted with the poultry around are producing 1/3 of what the hazelnuts with the poultry system are producing. It's really about decolonizing the thought process, the science, how we use science and knowledge, and then how we decolonize the methodology as well. If we hadn't decolonized our minds and our methodology, we probably would have built chicken tractors and put them in the middle of this field. That keeps the chickens in a secluded space, doesn't allow them to behave like chickens. And in this case, you can't even see the fences. They never even notice the fences. It's just when they come up to it, kind of allows us to corral them into that space. This is a video, and I hope it's going to play, of chickens the day before they were processed. Now, if you have chickens, ever raised meat broilers, just take a look at what they look like. The expressions, the feathers, the forage is still growing, even though they are huge. And this is on a space with 20 square foot per chicken per paddock for a total of 40 square feet per chicken in both paddocks combined. So next thing is we had to name this. This is the best expression that we could come up with. And this way we can secure the production protocol, the indigenous nature of this way of thinking, and also the, claiming the regenerative nature of this back to its origin, which is native. Regenerative agriculture is a native concept. Let's not get confused with that. So here's what a decolonized acre of land under a regenerative poultry production looks like. First of all, it's three-dimensional in space. We don't think of an acre as 43,560 square feet. For us, it starts 12 feet below the ground, which is the estimated depth of the hazelnut root. It ends 24 to 36 feet or more up above with the highest canopy, which can be oaks, it can be other species in the Midwest. We got sugar maple, basswood, and so on. We are really directly affecting a 1,568,000 or so cubic feet of energy transformation area, because we are managing the air energy as much as the biology of the top 12 inches of soil, as much as we are managing all of that energy once it's turned into cellulose. All of that is part of the poultry production system when it's done this way. The guaranteed production really can be measured as a triple return on investment. It optimizes the ecological restoration of native species and endemic macro and microorganisms. We have watched the soil explode in terms of its capacity to generate life. And we brought back the elderberries and the hazelnuts as the understory of this whole system. Those are both native to 2/3 of the continental US and to the world for that matter, because they follow the migratory bird species. Fascinating story behind that if one day you want to listen to it. But that's how, again, back to recuperating and bringing back some of that ancient indigenous knowledge so that we can make the right decisions in the present and into the future. We really optimize the economic value. We increase outputs or energy yields, and we do this while minimizing or even eliminating manufacturing inputs, which are the expenses. Those birds that you saw, we can raise birds now with less than 50% ground up feed. The rest is forage, sprouted systems, sprouted grain. We have our own mixes and all of that. And that allows us to minimize that manufacturing input, which also reduces expenses. The way we manage them takes very little time, no more than half an hour in the morning, maybe another half an hour during the day, and another half an hour during the evening. So maximum 1.5 to 2 hours, and a day to raise up to 1,500 broilers in healthy animals like the ones you saw. Also, this allows us to reconnect the fabric of farming communities, which is tremendously lost because of the way we have approached that linear thinking. Even small farms today who are not standardized and are part of a larger system where they have to coordinate and they depend on each other are starting to and have become very individualistic, which is another indicator of colonized thinking, is the idea that we individually can achieve anything. The larger context of regenerative agriculture, if you think of it from a decolonized mind perspective, the first thing you will know is that regenerative was pioneered by native indigenous peoples tens of thousands of years ago. I know that there are folks who want to claim this space. Please don't. That just shows that you are still dealing with the colonized demons, and you would just want to, this would be equivalent to appropriation of indigenous knowledge. No individual indigenous person or organization is claiming this. It is simply a native indigenous concept. Let's keep it that way. We also look at that three-dimensional physical space as a foundational design, rather than seeing the land as a flat surface. It is a four-dimensional spiritual living and energy transformation space. We don't think of it as a production space. It's a place for spirituality to become the center of how we design and how we create those energy yields. And so a colonized approach would seek the production, so whether it's chickens or eggs, and then call it regenerative. That's exactly the opposite. That's a colonized way, and that is not regenerative. You have to start with the spirituality of the space, because then you can see the holistic nature of how energy goes from non-edible in its form in the air and the soil and all of that into an edible form, which is the hazelnuts, the chickens, the meat, the eggs, and the elderberries and the wood and all of that, which has use for us. We know that regenerative agriculture or decolonized agriculture means no manufactured inputs. It only needs raw, free energy inputs. The factory of energy for the production or the energy yield is in the soil, is the microorganisms, the health of the soil. And we produce not a crop, but a yield of energy in different forms. And that's central to decolonizing the way we approach this. I have hundreds of stories of North Americans, Peace Corps volunteers, all of those folks who continue to colonize our communities across Latin America in the name of solutions and in the name of science and in the name of helping out, not realizing that what all they are doing is further subduing the very foundation of the solution. Rebuilding community governing and protection of Aboriginal ways. Keep in mind that I'm going through all of the decolonizing steps that I named way back at the beginning. In British Columbia, for example, I'm working out of Hazelton with the communities there. And one of the things they have achieved is that the whole region there has been able to resist, I believe it's over 20 oil pipeline projects and 15 or so mining operations that have been able to keep them out. And at the same time, they kept their original Aboriginal native governance. And they work parallel to the Canadian government imposed Indigenous councils, which are the recognized form of government, but they still keep those what they call the heritage chiefs and their territories and all of that. So this is critical. We need to keep rebuilding that, and then the governing structure so that we can oversee how this work is done. And there's quite a lot of stories of good success stories and reasons to be very hopeful, despite a lot of the bad news that we hear these days. Now, standardizing the processes so we can scale up the reclaiming and the ownership and control of the systems requires that we think in conventionally in some ways, but from the ground up in terms of structuring the industry level energy management blueprints so that we can build enterprises and economic models and so on. Now, with the poultry in the center, both the eggs and the broilers, we can aggregate. You know, the meat processing has to happen, grain processing, grain production, manure management. In this case, remember, I said 1 to 20 roughly units. So the manure and the giblets and all of that can allow us to affect up to 20 times the land that is engaged in direct production where the chickens roam under the trees. Perennial fruits and nuts is central to the regenerative poultry system. Now, fruits and nuts, fruits work best with egg layers. Nuts work with both. Don't try apples and apricots with broilers. Don't have time to tell you all the reasons why not. If you do, don't put too much energy or money into it. You're bound to take a high risk and probably lose it. You know, once you get the manure process, then we can move it into the production of food security products, you know, edible grains, field vegetables, all of those things. And I have a 8-stage, which is 8 years old, demonstration in my farm in Minnesota where we have the, you know, 8-year-old fields that still have not taken a single ounce of input since 8 years ago. And we're still haven't seen the end of that energy flow without any new inputs in some of those spaces. and then we are reloading and regenerating new spaces where we are, again, reclaiming more of that space and that land. So if you put it all together, I mean, obviously we need some other species. The closest to poultry is fish because, meat carnivore fish, of course, not tilapia, or any of those vegetarian fish, because we need them to eat the byproducts of the processors so that we can then run that energy through a separate independent species. Because species feeding is natural and perfect in nature, not feeding byproducts of the same species, of course. But once you put it through that, you can bring it back as supplements for the poultry itself. So again, the key is to watch the energy flow and make sure that we are building enterprise systems that allow for that flow to happen at a larger scale, and for us not to lose track of the flow. At the end, what you have is a really, excuse me, is a fully integrated energy management blueprint that can generate the level of activity that allows us to launch this as an industry with all of its industry components and system level components, such as enterprise management, financial, land management, organizing, R&D, training, extension, and so on. The end result really is a four-dimensional system. It's a regenerative system with, hold on, sorry. Okay, so I hope you captured that. That picture there. The standardizations of the processes to scaling up. I'm gonna do something quick here. I'm having trouble seeing part of the slides. Okay. So we have built this phase recovery process to be able to standardize this scaling. And, starting with the rediscovery, we pair it up with the gathering of info, establishing local operating structures and capacity. So we are doing the discovery, but at the same time building the infrastructure to not end up with books and reports, but rather with actual operations on the ground. The redevelopment is really developing the management systems and production capacity. So you saw the poultry production, you saw the blueprint of the whole industry's design and all of that. That's what we mean. The redeployment is really the engagement of that production, branding, processing, distribution, marketing. Growth and scaling really has to do with linking up producers within regions and then linking those regions so that we can scale up the impact across, say, the Midwest on the 12 states that we are targeting, the Midwest and the East and the West Coast. Guatemala as a country, we are managing it completely, Belize the same way. Mexico is too big to manage it as a single cluster or pool, so we're still mapping out how we're going to do that. In Colombia, we have the native communities partnering with us, same as in British Columbia. And many other countries are coming along to start doing this, including Brazil. The protection of the system is critical. The expanding this knowledge requires us to organize processes not only for reclaiming the appropriated resources, includes land, but more than anything is the intellectual property and the intellectual capacity more than the property to understand this. So because of that, we built those production units normally in a new space, which is where we can showcase this process. The farm level deployment, the regional system deployment, so the producer pools that I mentioned before, and then the industry level infrastructure. So watch those 4 stages, and here's how they laid out. First of all, the proof of concept. The production unit, whether it's for egg layers or broilers, the only thing that changes is the density of animals and the amount of space, because they behave very, very differently. For the broilers, it's 1.5 acres and 1,500 broilers per flock, rotated between 2 paddocks back and forth with a shelter, food supply, water, and so on. For the egg layer is upwards of 6,000 egg layers divided into 2 flocks of 3,000 each, which then are combined so that you can mechanize watering, feeding, and egg collection for both of them, and then each of those flocks backed up to each other so that you can have 2 paddocks on each side, 3 acres in total for each one, for a total of 6 acres. And bam, you got a regenerative, the blueprint applied to a much more efficient, larger scale production. It doesn't mean you can have 20 chickens or 50, whatever. What we were looking for is where is the balancing point so that we can actually think at scale and think at an industry level so that we don't end up with again, subjugated to the corners, to the edges, unable to change systems in a serious way. This is my place. This is the one production unit way back when we started. This is today fully deployed. It's probably bigger than this now because this is from 2 years ago. This is a production unit building. The shelter is designed with every detail has been designed to accommodate the risk management strategies, meaning reducing almost any possibility for the chickens to get hurt, to get to be cooked up. I mean, you saw those chickens how in the video they are afraid of me, even though I feed them every day. And the reason is because they have never been touched, they have never been handled, they have never been cooked up or any of that. They have completely lived a natural life. And this building has been, I designed this building over many years, modifying it every time we had an observation. And this is the last design. This is the side that leads to the paddocks. You can see there's 4 doors open. The paddock is divided right down to the middle of the building so that then we can rotate them back and forth without us having to do anything. All we do is we don't open the doors on one side. We open the other side and the chickens go out on their own. The way to get 100% of the chickens out is to never feed them indoors, except for the egg layers. The broilers are never fed indoors after day 24. After 24 days, they are trained, and we have a manual. I'm finishing it up now, where we explain step by step how you do all of this. This is the farm level deployment. This is the first Regeneration Farms operation. Is the first prototype of a commercial operation. It's got the space for 5 production units in the south. 2 of those are already built, and then all the alley cropping on the contours that you see. This farm will go from producing about $45,000 a year to producing $950,000 a year of gross income, and about from that about 10 to 15% of actual profit margins. The regional deployment of producer pools again works by integrating all of these different sectors that we talked about before. So this is an economic model, but it is really the blueprint for how you organize producers as well, how you organize the defragmentation of regional ecological corridors, how you organize water cleanup and retention. All of those things can be done on the same basis, on the basis of the same blueprint. This is a quick example of what it looks like on the other side once you start aggregating the economic value. Producer pool is around to start with. This is like the baseline. From here, we can grow to any scale that the market and the community may want to support. We start with 250 production units, which is kind of a break-even point. Below that, it really won't get to that place where we can be competitive in the marketplace. That's $22 million wholesale value, about $13 million for the farm gate value for the farmer. The hazelnut production, in this case, at around $10 million, considering at about $1.50 a pound of clean hazelnuts. Value to farmers around $4 million. 7,070 acres engaged in this blueprint, and about 1.75 million broilers as a baseline, with a total aggregated cluster impact or producer pool impact of $32.7 million, plus the clean water, restore soil, the re-engagement of the community, and especially this wealth. This wealth is fully distributed and decolonized. There are things we need to do to build systems and to protect these existing resources and expand these aboriginal systems and organize the process for reclaiming more of those appropriated resources. And we are probably coming into a space where this may be doable on one end of the social spectrum and absolutely impossible on the other end. If you go to our current government, this is impossible. But we go to other governments that have come before and others who will be coming, and we have opportunities to engage this higher level support system and infrastructure to continue to decolonize our communities and our way of thinking about this. And I hope you can all find your own examples of successes. We need to build that governance, the industry level governance, the support system, the infrastructure to actually achieve systems level success and changes. It doesn't just happen. We have to build this infrastructure because the infrastructure that exists today is not designed for this kind of systems change. It's designed to perpetuate what's already going on. And what's going on is extractive and degenerative. So at this point, with the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance, I have started working with, centered on the poultry, of course, but bringing in the other sectors so that, with their leadership, we can build a larger alliance and ecosystem to be able to achieve this industry level governance systems and support infrastructure. And I hope some of you in the audience will be interested on having a conversation and partnering to achieve this level of systems change. Decolonizing poultry systems, really going regenerative. In our case, these are the numbers that I'm basing our planning from. We consume, we in 1.8, 1.5 acre production unit, we can raise around 7,000 brooders a year in warmer regions in south of the cutoff line of the northern climate. 1 PU of production unit of egg layers is 6 acres and can produce around 2 million eggs a year. U.S. chicken consumption is at around 93 pounds a person. That's 7.6 billion a year. And eggs is about 1.6 million. 5% of that market would be around 380 million chickens. Probably more than that because I'm using 4-pound average bird and it's more like 3.75. So when you fine tune it, it's more like 450 million. 218 retail value of conventional chicken is about $1.47 a pound. That gives us a $2.235 billion market that we are looking at. Egg consumption at 278 per person. And again, these numbers are critical because it allows us to calculate based on the outputs and the yields per production unit. We narrow it down to a more linear colonized way of looking at the market because there has to be a space here where we speak the same language. And this allows us to seek through that larger system and then isolate the opportunity for a system level kind of change. That to us is around $3 billion of national opportunity that is sitting in front of us. And by the way, it's 2.694 million acres of impact that we could have with this system alone. That is only 5% of the total acreage that is already in the hands of Indian reservations in the country today. So if you wanted to think, well, is this doable or not? Not only is it's doable by the very original people of this land. We have to want to do it though. And that's where the big if comes from. Luckily, because we're working with a lot of Native communities, we are seeing a lot of changes there. And if we can unleash that, we can unleash $3 billion of regenerative decolonized poultry systems in the U.S. alone, without counting all the other places we're really working on. So what changes if we decolonize poultry at scale? We'll at least take $3 billion or 5% of the market. We'll shift it. If we can do 1%, actually, we tip over. So this is very ambitious, but that's how we have to do this. So we bring back nutrient-dense native seeds to feed people and animals, because again, it's not just about raising chickens, it's about integrating the whole supply chain restoring soil, water systems, native species, and the 2.7 million acres of native species that we could restore. In Pine Ridge, for example, we're working there with the community to deploy this system. We've been producing for almost 2 years. And we brought back the choke cherries, the buffalo berries, the tinsel, the native oaks there, the Savannah oaks. That's what I mean by reestablishing, bringing back, restoring those native species. We can exponentially increase the production of native foods if we do this right. Really can increase the value of that land in terms of its wealth, which is measured in biology primarily, because biology is the center, is the factory of energy. Where the energy gets transformed and turned into the things that are actually worth money or worth something on our table. This way we can re-engage the science and the excitement about things, which allows us to engage young people and really reclaim those indigenous regenerative processes as a foundation of the future of agriculture. So yeah, we can do this. We've got to start regenerating. This is just a glimpse for you to have an idea of how deep we have gone into systems engineering before we started producing chickens. We first integrated all of the different sectors, all of the different programming areas, all of the different industry components, and then the phases of deployment. You can see on the left-hand side, you got the critical operating sectors for deployment and integration, and on the right side, critical support infrastructure. So all the way from governing to certification to verification, criteria, indicators, verifiers, validation, policy changes that we have to promote in order to do this, public education so that we can achieve the policy changes, all of that, all the way to the more operating aspects on the left, which is number one critical thing is production or regenerative ag doesn't happen in one isolated area at a time. It has to be integrated, so that's the interrelated industry sectors. That's where the foundation of the blueprint for launching the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance came from. Management, farms, farm level and system levels, two very different things, but same blueprint, same 5 modules: marketing, communications, operations, human resources, financial and support systems, correlated up and down between the farm and the system level. So we have a cohesive management infrastructure. Supply chain, of course, requires retraining of farmers, recuperation of information, publication of that information, using that to generate technical assistance, curriculum, bringing that curriculum into universities and all that, and so on. And we are really advanced on achieving that. R&D has been my main thing up to now. Now I'm moving into the other areas. Layering this, we did the production unit prototyping and proofing. We are now well advanced into the farm level. And we just started a year ago the regional deployments. Once we get 2 or 3 regional deployments in the Midwest, we can move into integrating those for a regional impact and a full system deployment. So folks, that's it for today. I hope you got something worth taking home and that your time was well spent. I hope I delivered that.
Thank you so much, Regi, for that presentation and providing us with that perspective on the model that you've been working on for a long time. It looks like quite to an in-depth scale. That's fantastic. So right now we're going to open up the floor for questions. We're going to use the question box initially. That way I can moderate it and we're not all talking to each other. So go ahead, and if you have any questions for Regi, you're more than welcome to pose them in the question boxes on the GoToWebinar panel. And we'll just wait for those to come in.
Just FYI, I can't see that. I guess I'm muted.
Okay, we have a comment that is really impressive. I especially appreciate the systems approach and the data on native land resources. Lots of useful thinking and models. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, we have another question. And so this is saying, will the recording or the PPT be available to share with others? And yes, the recording will be available to share, and then I can have Reggie send me the PowerPoint afterwards, and I can send it out to everyone. Another question. I missed the first half, so perhaps you already addressed this, but wondering where are you getting the startup capital?
Okay. Can I just respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Reggie.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if I was muted. Okay. This is so funny. Startup capital. The first source was my house mortgage. My wife and I mortgaged our house to get the first unit built, the one that I showed you in that picture. And we ended up about $129,000 in debt. Since then, we have recuperated most of it. So that was the first thing. The second one was just grants we got after I lined this up with a nonprofit. So we were able to raise grants to do some more of the R&D and the prototyping units. And then more recently, the startup capital for Regeneration Farms launch came from 4 of us founding members, primarily, a local lender. And we are now seeking new private investors so that we can grow from there. In Guatemala, it came out of also individuals like me. We just got together as a community and we pitched in our capital and we launched the Highlands Demonstration and Production System Center. In Mexico, the startup capital came from Mercola, Mercola.com. They had a partnership with the Via Organica, and they donated about, I believe, $150,000 startup capital for that. In British Columbia, they got a grant from the federal government for $250,000 to set up their first prototype, and so on. Very diverse. At this point, we are looking at the program-related investments, mission-related investments, and larger sources of crowdsourcing as well. For example, in Omaha, we're working with the Canjobal community. It's a Mayan resettlement of Mayan displaced natives from Guatemala. And I'm being very clear that they are not immigrants. They are displaced native nation by the war. And they landed in Omaha, Nebraska, and they were registered at the UN as a displaced nation. And they have kept their government in exile. They have the Canjobal parliament in the US, and they have kept the community really nice and tight. And their systems are not intact, but still manage the community systems and all that. So we are tapping into that infrastructure because their members, even though they can only contribute like $50 a month, altogether can contribute enough to launch a $6 million operation in Nebraska over the next 5 years. So that's another very different startup capital strategy we are using there.
Great. We have another comment. Thank you so much. Really great. Plan to listen again and share with team. Volunteer on county park dedicated to agricultural education. Agroforestry started and oak savanna habitat being restored. Oak and remnant species present. So hopefully this will be shared as well.
Yes.
Great. Any more questions? I will open up the microphone for anyone that might be calling in. So if anyone wants to pose a question there, we can also do that. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'm just gonna wrap things up very quickly. All right. If you have any questions, ideas, comments, concerns, what have you, feel free to email me at wfullwider, FULWIDER, at ipminstitute.org. I will respond to those questions, and hopefully we can integrate them into webinars in the future. And also be on the lookout for a follow-up email with the evaluation and the link to apply for CEUs if you're applying for those. And with that, I would like to thank everyone that attended the webinar, and I would especially like to thank Regi for taking his time to explain to us his indigenous thinking approach to regenerative agriculture. And with that, hopefully see you in October at the next one. Thank you.